Okay, great to see everyone. Hope you're doing well and that your week has gotten off to a good start. We're going to do a couple of Rashis from the second Aliyah since today is Monday. Actually, we'll do one Rashi from yesterday's Aliyah and one Rashi from today's Aliyah and try to jump right into the story of Sefer Shmos. So exciting to begin a new Sefer and to begin a new Parsha, of course, as we do every week. Of course, the Parsha begins with the unfortunate descent of the Jewish people into slavery. And what I wanted to point out from yesterday's Aliyah is that unfortunately, the story of anti-Semitism in Jewish history reverberates and repeats itself in every single era. And the story is almost always the same. If you remember the way the whole story of our slavery in Egypt began, after Yosef dies, the Jewish people are quite multiplous. Bnei Yisrael paru, vayishretzu, vayirbu, vayatzmu, bim'od ma'od vatimaleh ha'aretz otam. We become a good chunk of the population. We repopulate ourselves. We regenerate ourselves. We continue to grow over the generations, which is the great bracha that we saw throughout Bereshis to all of the avos and imos, that our children would multiply and that we would have a great nation. Kachol asher al sfat hayam, kakochvei hashamayim larov. So many different expressions for the multiplicity of Jews, and that came to fruition right away here in Egypt. But of course, the surrounding populations get very nervous when they see us increase and when they see us rise to power. And here we had both. We had Yosef, who was in power, and now even after he was no longer in power, he had died. We have the Jews populating and growing in population over the course of time. And then the Torah tells us, Vayakam melech chadash al Mitzrayim asher lo yada es Yosef. A new king arose in Egypt who didn't know Yosef. And Rashi cites the Machlokes Amoraim from the Gemara, Rav and Shmuel, Chad Amar Chadash Mamish, V'chad Amar Shnischadshu Gezerosav. Whether it's actually a new king or the same king who enacts new gezeros, new kinds of edicts, it doesn't matter. Either way, whether it was an actual new king or not, Lo Yadas Yosef. They didn't know Yosef. And Rashi points out what that means, Asher Lo Yada. Asa atzmo ki'ilu lo haya yada'o. He made himself as if he didn't know Yosef. That's the beginning of anti-Semitism. That's the beginning of our slavery in Egypt. Whether this was the same king that existed in the time of Yosef or a new king, they of course would have known Yosef. Yosef was a famous person. He saved all of Egypt. So what does the pasuk mean? Asher lo yadas Yosef. Asatzmo ki'ilu lo yada'o. He made himself make believe as if he didn't know him. He pretended that he didn't know him. He pretended that there was never a Yosef, that he wasn't part of the Jews, that he never saved Egypt. That's the beginning of the story of anti-Semitism. To take all the good that Jews have done, to take all the contributions that Jews have made, and to either ignore it, to pretend it doesn't exist, to forget about it, or to twist it into something new, to something different that looks sinister. That is the start of the story. That's the start of the story here. And of course, it gets worse and worse. Havan ischak malo pen yirbeh. We have to do something. They're going to take us over. They're going to rebel. They're going to infiltrate our country. They're going to, push us out, whatever the case is. Same theories in every generation. One of the things that Paro does, of course, is he enacts the Gezerah to throw the male children into the Nile. And that's one of the ways that he hopes to decimate the Jewish people, to control its population, to overtake it. If we skip forward to the second Aliyah, we'll see a very interesting pasuk. Of course, the Miyaldos, who we believe are Shifra and Pua, they don't listen to Paro, and they make some excuse that the women give birth so fast that they couldn't get there fast enough to throw the babies into the Nile. And so Paro is upset, but they're really doing what they think is right in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, trying to protect the Jewish babies. Now, the pasuk tells us that God rewarded them. Vayitev Elohim lamiyaldos vayarav ha'am v'yatzmu. God rewarded the miyaldos for their behavior. God made sure the Jewish people would continue to multiply. Because they feared God, God made them homes. Rashi says that they become the progenitors of Kahuna, they become the progenitors of Malchus, etc. Now, here's the pasuk I want to focus on today. Vayitzav Paro l'chol amo le'mor. He abandons faith in the Miyaldos, and now the whole nature of the Gezerah changes, right? His command to the Miyaldos, ha'ivrios, the midwives of the Jewish people, was go, and as soon as you're helping them with the birth, take the baby and discard the baby, kill the baby. They didn't listen. It didn't work. Now Paro changes his tactic. He doesn't speak to the miyaldos. He doesn't speak to the midwives. He now speaks to the whole nation. Vayitzar paro lechol amo lemor. Kol haben hayalod hayaoro tashlichu. V'chol habas techayun. Every male child you throw into the Nile, every female child you can let them live. It sounds here like the command is that every person needs to, it's hard to even say these words, but get rid of their own babies. Or if they see a neighbor giving birth, it's their responsibility to get rid of the baby. It's not only the responsibility of the miyaldos. That system was not working anymore. So he had to broaden it to put the responsibility on everybody. But there's something else Rashi learns in this pasuk, which is such an incredible chiddush. And it's such a disturbing chiddush. But again, as we round out the story today in this Rashi session, it's the typical story of any case of anti-Semitism. And that is, Rashi says, when it says L'chol Amo, he didn't only command everybody in the nation, Jews and non-Jews, Egyptians, to take care of making sure every Jewish baby goes into the Nile. But L'chol Amo was even worse than that. Af alehem gazar. Rashi says that what Paro was telling the Egyptians, not the Jews, the Egyptians, is that they too now had to throw their babies into the Nile. It wasn't just the Jews, right? So there's two stages in the evolution of the Gezerah, or two changes to the Gezerah. The first Gezerah was that the Jewish midwives should throw out the Jewish babies. And now the Gezerah changes. Now everyone should throw out their own babies, Jews and non-Jews, and they should do it themselves. Two changes in the Gezerah. That's incredible. Why? Because Yom Shenolad Moshe, Amru lo istagnino nav. On the day Moshe was born, Paro's astrologers said to him, Hayom nolad, ve'ein anu yodim imi mitzris imi Yisraelis, ve'roin anu shesofo lilkos b'mayim, lefikach gazaroso hayom al afal hamitzrim, shenemar kol haben hayalod, ve'lo nemar hayalod le'ivriim. His astrologer said on the day Moshe was born, the savior of the Jewish people is born. And we know that his end is supposed to be with the water. He's going to have something bad happen to him with the water. But we don't know who gave birth to him. We don't know if it's going to be an Egyptian woman or a Jewish woman. And therefore, Paro decides, you know what? I can't risk, whether the person is Egyptian or Jewish, that they're going to rise to save the Jewish people. And therefore, Kol haben hayalod hayor tashtichu, all male children should be thrown in the Nile, even the Egyptian ones, even those born of Egyptian women. So now back to the pasuk. Vayitzar paro l'chol amo, that's change number one. He commands the whole nation to take part in this infanticide. And then, lemor, he says, kol haben hayalod hayor tashlichu, that all male children, including the Egyptians, have to be thrown in the Nile. Now, of course, he was right, and the astrologers were right and wrong, right? Rashi points out, Hein lo hayu yoden shesofa lokos amay meriva. The Moshiach Shel Yisrael, Moshe was born on that day, right? He would have something bad happen to him with water when he hits the rock in the desert, and he's punished for it, not to be able to enter the land of Israel later on in his life. But they got it a little bit wrong. It wasn't the waters of the Nile that would be the problem for him. It was the waters later on. So anyways, aside from the astrology point, I want to just point out that this Rashi, if this is true, that Paro made every Egyptian throw their own child in the Nile because of his hatred for Jews, or what we would call today anti-Semitism. It just shows the depth of depravity of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is so illogical, so irrational, so awful, and runs so deep that the leader of a nation would say to his own people, I want you to kill your babies to make sure no Jews succeed or survive. It's ridiculous. It's incredible in an awful way. It's horrifying. But unfortunately, it's what we've seen over and over, time and time again. And that should just remind us just how insidious anti-Semitism is, and all we need to do to be able to battle against it, not only for our own survival, but really for the betterment of the world as well. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you.